There's something you should know about me before I tell you how I destroyed my marriage in a single night. I wasn't always this person. Once, I was the woman people pointed to as proof that second chances work. When I met Tony, I was 30, 5 years older than him, fresh out of a divorce that had drained me both financially and emotionally. My ex-husband, Clayton, had been finishing his residency at the hospital when he decided to have an affair with a nurse. That betrayal burned deep, not just because of the cheating itself, but because I had believed in him with my whole heart. I had imagined a family with him. Children. Holidays together. Growing old side by side. Instead, I got a cold conversation over coffee and a divorce that left me with barely enough to cover rent. I worked as a waitress, scraping tips together to keep the lights on, pretending I wasn't humiliated by how far I'd fallen. Then came Tony. He was different from Clayton in every possible way. Where Clayton was smooth and slightly arrogant, Tony was grounded. Where Clayton had been careless with money, Tony was meticulous. He wasn't flashy, but when he looked at me, I felt safe. Wanted. Like I wasn't just a failed chapter in someone's life. I was the whole book. He didn't care about the age difference. He didn't see me as damaged goods, even though that's how I thought of myself at the time. He saw me. And that was intoxicating. We married, built a home together, and raised twin daughters, Mara and Carrie. For 19 years, Tony was my partner in everything, the kind of husband other women envied. He remembered anniversaries, celebrated my small victories, and made me laugh when I was stressed. But Tony was also ambitious. He climbed the corporate ladder with a laser focus, moving from accountant to CFO. I admired him for it most of the time. But sometimes I felt like his career was the mistress he'd never cheat on me with. There were nights when the girls were little that I'd sit alone at the kitchen table while he worked late, telling myself this was the price of security. We had love. We had stability. What more did I want? The truth? I wanted to be chosen. Not in the big, life-altering ways. He had already done that when he married me, but in the small, everyday ways. To feel like I came first, even if just for a night. So when Carol, my best friend since college, asked me to be her maid of honor, I was thrilled. Carol had been through her own hell, a brutal divorce after her husband cheated while she was battling a life-threatening illness. For years, I'd watched her fight to find herself again. Then she met Brandon, and suddenly she was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in a decade. This wedding wasn't just another event on the calendar. It was a celebration of survival, of loyalty, of friendship. And I wanted Tony there, standing beside me, sharing that joy. 3 days before the ceremony, we were in the kitchen after dinner when he told me, "Love, the merger meeting was moved up. I have to leave tomorrow morning. I won't be back until late Sunday. I'm sorry." I stared at him, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. "You're kidding. Tell me you're kidding, Tony." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit I'd seen countless times before big presentations. "It's the biggest deal of my career. $2 billion. I'm the one in charge. If I don't go, it could cost the firm everything. We've worked on this for over a year." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe he was saying this. "And you think me standing there alone as the maid of honor isn't a big deal? Carol's been through hell, Tony. I've been planning for months. Couldn't someone else handle it?" "No one else can," he said, his tone firm now. "I know it's hard, but I'll make it up to you. We'll get a nice bonus from this, and I'll take you somewhere special." The conversation ended in a silence that was thick and cold. That night, I told him to sleep in the guest room. I couldn't even look at him. I was angry, but underneath that, I was hurt. Deeply. And maybe that's where the seed was planted. The thought I didn't want to admit to myself. The one that whispered, "If he's not going to choose you tonight, maybe someone else will." The morning of Carol's wedding was a blur of curling irons, makeup brushes, and champagne glasses. Carol was radiant, her eyes shining with the kind of happiness you can't fake. I wanted to match her joy, to be fully present for her, but there was a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. Every time my phone buzzed, a part of me hoped it was Tony saying he'd found a way to make it after all. But there was nothing, just silence. I told myself I wouldn't let it ruin the day. I smiled for the photographers, adjusted Carol's veil, and gave a heartfelt speech at the reception. The applause was warm, but when I sat down, the empty chair beside me burned like a neon sign reminding everyone, and me, that my husband wasn't there. After dinner, the music picked up. Couples filled the dance floor, some swaying to slow songs, others laughing through the upbeat ones. I was sipping champagne when I saw him. Clayton. I hadn't laid eyes on him in years. He looked older, lines around his mouth, a little paunch where there used to be muscle, his hair thinning. And yet, when our eyes met, I felt a strange jolt of familiarity. He smiled and made his way over. Vera. Wow. You look exactly the same. I laughed, surprised at the rush of warmth his voice brought. And you look different, I teased, though my heart was beating faster. We talked about surface things at first, how we knew the bride and groom, what we'd been up to since. He told me he was divorced again. I didn't ask for details. When the band started a slow song, he held out his hand. Dance with me. I hesitated. My instincts said no. My pride said yes. I took his hand. On the dance floor, he was the same Clayton I remembered, confident, charming, leaning in just close enough to make my skin tingle. I heard you married an accountant, he said with a grin. That's different. He's not just an accountant, I said, though my voice lacked the conviction it should have had. He's a CFO now. Impressive. Does he treat you right? The question hung between us, heavy. My mind flashed to the empty chair beside me, the guest room I'd sent Tony to, the plane ticket that had taken him thousands of miles away on a weekend I'd begged him to be here. I guess, I said, sipping my champagne to avoid his eyes. One song bled into another. I should have gone back to my table. Instead, I stayed. The champagne was warm in my veins, softening the edges of my guilt. Then Clayton leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was a kiss from someone who knew exactly how my body would respond. For a split second, I froze, the rational part of me screaming, "This is wrong, stop now." But then, I didn't stop. My mind built excuses faster than I could question them. Tony isn't here. It's just a kiss. No one will know. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was harmless. But when he kissed me again, longer, deeper, and his hand slid over my chest, my stomach knotted with a mix of thrill and dread. We slipped away from the crowd, found a quieter corner, and kept talking, laughing, touching in ways that crossed every line I'd once sworn I'd never cross again. And then my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my purse and saw his name, Tony. Relief flooded me. Maybe he was calling from Germany just to hear my voice. But it wasn't a call. It was a text. Guess what, sweetheart? My meeting was rescheduled. I came back early. Looks like you're in good hands tonight. I'll be gone by the time you get home tomorrow. Have a blast. My heart stopped. I looked up, scanning the room, and there he was. For a brief moment, our eyes met. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, they were cold. Then he turned and walked out. Panic surged through me. I muttered something to Clayton, I don't even remember what, and ran. My heels clattered against the floor as I reached the hallway, just in time to see the exit door swinging shut. Tony, please wait. I called, my voice shaking. He glanced back once, his expression hard, then turned away, sliding into his car. The door shut. The engine roared. And then he was gone. I stood there in the cold night air, my breath coming fast, my hands trembling around the phone that still held the words that would end my marriage. The moment Tony's taillights disappeared, it was like the warmth was sucked out of my body. I stood there for a few seconds, frozen, hoping he would stop, back up, roll down the window, something. But he didn't. My fingers were clumsy as I dialed his number. Ring. Ring. Voicemail. Tony, please answer. I can explain. My voice cracked, and I hung up before I could sound more desperate. I tried again. And again. The calls went straight to voicemail now. I switched to texting. 7:58 p.m. Tony, please, just talk to me. 8:01 p.m. It's not what you think. 8:05 p.m. I love you. Please. Each minute that passed without a reply made my chest tighter. The music from the reception hall floated down the corridor, distant and muffled, like it belonged to a different world, one I'd just been exiled from. I sank down onto the curb outside, the night air biting against my bare shoulders. My champagne buzz was wearing off, and in its place came a sickening clarity. My phone lit up. My heart leapt until I saw it was my friend Marcy. "Where are you? You just ran out. Are you okay?" "No," I whispered into the phone. My voice shook. "Tony saw me. With Clayton." The silence on the other end said everything. Then, softly, "Oh, Vera." Minutes later, Marcy and another friend, Denise, were beside me. They didn't lecture. They didn't ask why. They just helped me to my feet and walked me back to the hotel. I barely remember getting into bed. I remember the taste of salt as I cried into the pillow. The way my stomach churned until I thought I'd be sick. The steady, awful realization that he saw everything. The next morning, my phone was still in my hand when I woke, my eyes gritty from crying. I tried again. Ring. Ring. Voicemail. I sent more texts, shorter now, stripped of charm, just raw. "Please come home." It didn't mean anything. "We can fix this." Finally, at 10:32 a.m., my phone buzzed. I opened it fast, relief flaring until I read the words. "Forget you. I'm doing fine at my job. My children are grown. Everything is paid for. I can start again." No punctuation. No warmth. Just a clean cut. I stared at it, my fingers trembling. This wasn't Tony in a rage. This was Tony in resolution. I didn't know until later, until my phone started blowing up, that he'd gone public. A mutual friend called first. "Vera, did you see his Facebook?" "No," I said, though my voice was small. "You might want to." I opened the app and my stomach dropped. There it was. His status, single and available. And right beneath it, the photos. Photo 1, me and Clayton, his mouth on mine. Photo 2, Clayton's hand on my breast. The caption, "Vera is upgrading, back with her ex." I'm heading to the dating scene. Comments were already piling in. Some were supportive toward Tony, others just nosy. But I knew enough of our shared friends to realize that whispers would spread fast. My phone rang again. It was my sister. I didn't answer. When I finally returned home 2 days later, the house felt wrong. No music, no warm light, no smell of coffee brewing. Just silence. The first thing I saw was the kitchen table. My heart stuttered. On it sat my wedding ring, the one I'd worn for 19 years, gleaming under the sunlight from the window. Beside it was a note in Tony's handwriting. "Don't call me. We'll talk when the divorce paperwork is ready." I sank into the chair, staring at it until my vision blurred. My fingers brushed the ring, but I couldn't bring myself to pick it up. It felt like touching a tombstone. I called him again, knowing it was pointless. No answer. I left one final message. "Tony, please. Just don't do this yet. Talk to me." I didn't know it yet, but he was already moving faster than I could keep up. Lawyers, real estate agents, closed accounts. The marriage wasn't dying slowly. It was being executed. The days after that were a blur of trying to reach him and hitting walls at every turn. I called his office. The receptionist's voice was polite but firm. "Mr. Whitaker has left instructions that he's not taking personal calls at work." I drove there anyway. Security stopped me in the lobby. "I'm his wife," I insisted. My voice cracked, but they didn't budge. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we've been instructed." That word, instructed, cut deeper than I expected. He had thought about this. Planned for it. He wasn't just avoiding me. He had shut every door I could try to walk through. I called his sister, hoping she'd at least listen. She didn't even let me finish my sentence. "Vera, he's done. You know that, right?" His mother was more polite, but the sympathy in her voice was reserved for him. And then there was James, my father-in-law in all but title. He picked up on the second ring. "James, please, I just need to talk to him." "I know what happened," he said, his tone heavy. "I saw the pictures, Vera. With Clayton, of all people? Even if nothing happened beyond that, you know Tony. That was enough." "I was drunk," I whispered. I was angry he missed the wedding. It didn't go any further. "Doesn't matter," James said, and his voice was the final verdict. You broke his trust. And that's not something he comes back from. When the envelope came from his lawyer, my hands shook opening it. It was clean, clinical, without spite, but cold all the same. We'd split the savings. I could keep my car. He'd pay me $22,000 a month in alimony for 2 years. The house would be sold. There was no letter. No note. Not even a line about hoping I was okay. Just signatures. I stared at the last page for a long time. This was how 19 years ended, in black ink, typed clauses, and the faint smell of legal paper. The real estate agent came the next week. She walked through my kitchen, my bedroom, my garden like it was already someone else's. Tony didn't show up for the walkthrough. He didn't need to, he'd already moved out. I packed my clothes into boxes, leaving the furniture, the dishes, the framed photos of vacations and birthdays. Each picture felt like a punch to the ribs. I wanted to take them, but I didn't. I told myself I didn't deserve to. By the time I closed the front door for the last time, it didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a museum of a life I'd ruined. The first time I heard he was seeing someone, it came from a friend who didn't realize she was twisting the knife. She's gorgeous, the friend said casually. Young. They look happy. I told myself it was a rebound. That he'd come back eventually. That the comfort we'd built together for nearly 2 decades couldn't be replaced by some 20-something smile. But then I saw a photo online, Tony at a vineyard, his arm around a brunette with eyes like summer skies. She was laughing, her hand on his chest like she belonged there. And maybe she did. The divorce was final before I could fully grasp that it was real. One day I was Mrs. Tony Whitaker, with a husband, a home, and a shared future. The next, I was just Vera, living in a rented apartment in Chicago, with half the furniture mine and half the life I'd built gone. For a while, I told myself I was fine. I had a job as a receptionist at a medical clinic, enough money from the alimony to live comfortably, and Clayton, well, he was there. Not the love of my life, not even someone I fully trusted, but a familiar face to come home to. It wasn't happiness, but it was something. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Living with Clayton. Our relationship was strange from the start. We weren't in love, not really, but we shared a history. There were moments when he was kind, moments when we laughed about old memories, but underneath it was a hollowness we both ignored. Sometimes I'd catch him watching TV, the glow of the screen making the lines on his face look deeper, and I'd think, this is what I traded for Tony. The thought made my stomach knot. But I stayed. Because leaving meant being truly alone, and I wasn't ready for that. Tony's life, everywhere. I didn't seek out information about Tony. It found me. Mutual friends posting photos. Social media algorithms that seemed to know exactly which wounds to press. At first, it was pictures of him with friends, traveling, smiling in ways that made my chest ache. Then Cheryl appeared. Young, effortlessly pretty, with that kind of open joy that photographs love. The first photo of them together nearly broke me. They were standing outside a theater, her hand tucked into his arm, both of them laughing like they shared some private joke. I zoomed in on his face, he looked lighter, freer. When I found out they'd gotten married, I told myself it was too fast, that it wouldn't last. But then Jolene was born, and a year later Lily. Now there were family portraits. Matching sweaters at Christmas. Sunlit afternoons in the backyard of the house we'd once shared, the house he bought back. My garden was gone, replaced by Cheryl's landscaping, but the oak tree still stood, now with a swing for the girls. Every photo felt like a reminder. This is the life you could have had. This is the life you threw away. The twins. Mara and Carrie, our twin daughters, stayed in my life, but it was different. They loved me, I knew that, but they were closer to him. He'd been the constant, the steady one during the divorce, the one who didn't make excuses. I tried to be present, birthdays, graduations, holidays, but there was a wall between us now. It wasn't anger, it was distance. They respected me, but I could feel that they admired him. At Mara's graduation, I stood in the crowd and watched Tony hug her, both of them beaming. At her wedding, I sat 2 rows back as he walked her down the aisle. I smiled for the photos, clapped at the speeches, and swallowed the lump in my throat. 2 years later, at Carrie's wedding, the ache was the same. The girls were happy, and that was all that mattered, but in those moments, I was sharply aware that Tony's place in their lives was unshakable, while mine felt conditional. Regret's quiet voice. The thing about regret is that it doesn't always scream. It's quieter than that. It comes in the form of late nights when you can't sleep, wondering how things might have been different if you'd just walked away from the dance floor that night. It's in the silence after an argument with Clayton, when you realize you're fighting with a man you don't even truly want to be with. It's in the photographs of smiling faces that you're no longer part of. I used to think Tony overreacted, that he could have forgiven me, that 19 years meant more than one mistake. But as time passed, I understood. He didn't leave because of the kiss alone. He left because I broke the one thing he valued most, trust. And once you break that with someone like Tony, you never get it back. It was Mara who called. "Mom, we're having a barbecue at Dad's next weekend. You should come." My first instinct was to refuse. Tony would be there. Cheryl would be there. The idea of standing in their backyard, pretending I wasn't the outsider, made my stomach knot. But Mara's voice was gentle, coaxing. "It's been over 10 years. I think it's time. For all of us." I told her I'd think about it. And then I spent the rest of the week debating with myself. Part of me wanted to see him, to see them. To face the reality I'd only watched from a distance. The other part feared it would undo whatever scraps of peace I'd built. In the end, I went. Stepping back into our old world. The house looked both the same and entirely different. The front porch was lined with potted plants, not mine. The shutters had been repainted a deep green. In the driveway, there was a minivan I didn't recognize. I stood there for a moment, my hands damp against the strap of my purse, before walking to the backyard. It was alive with sound, children's laughter, music, the hum of voices over the smell of grilled burgers. Jolene and Lily darted past me, their hair flying, giggling as they ran toward the swing hanging from the old oak tree. The garden was unrecognizable, transformed into a neat, colorful space that reflected Cheryl's taste. It stung, but I couldn't deny it was beautiful. Cheryl. She was the first to greet me. "Vera, hi," she said, smiling like she genuinely meant it. "I'm so glad you came." I'd expected cool civility, maybe a hint of smugness. Instead, she was warm, welcoming even. That disarmed me more than hostility ever could. She introduced me to a few guests I didn't know, then excused herself to check on the food. I stood there, feeling strangely untethered, until I heard his voice. "Tony, it's good to see you," he said. I turned, and there he was, older, yes, but still. Tony. The same steady presence, the same eyes that had once looked at me like I was his whole world. "You too," I said, my voice quieter than I'd intended. "This place, it's beautiful. You've done so much with it." He nodded. "The girls love it here." We stood in silence for a beat, the weight of 19 years and everything after pressing between us. My throat felt tight. "I've never stopped regretting what I did," I said finally. I threw away everything for a moment of stupidity. I want you to know I'm happy you found someone who makes you happy." He studied me, and I braced myself for judgment, maybe even bitterness. But there was none. "I forgave you a long time ago, Vera," he said. "We both made choices. Yours hurt me, but they led me here. And I wouldn't trade this life for anything." The words landed like both a blow and a gift. It stung to hear he wouldn't change a thing, because it meant there was no version of our lives where we found our way back to each other. But it also meant he wasn't carrying anger anymore. "You always were the better person," I managed. "I'm trying to be better for the girls, for myself. That's all any of us can do," he said. He gestured toward the patio where Mara and Carrie were laughing with Cheryl. "Come on. They'll want to see you." The rest of the night was civil. We talked in small groups. I caught up with the twins, who hugged me warmly. I even spoke with Cheryl again, who seemed to genuinely care about making everyone comfortable. From across the yard, I watched Tony with his family, Cheryl's hand in his, their daughters weaving around them, his smile easy and unforced. It was the life I'd once had. The life I'd thrown away. When I left, the sky was streaked with gold and the air was cooling. Tony walked me to the gate. Take care of yourself, Vera, he said. You too, I replied. After driving back to Chicago, I felt something shift. I didn't feel forgiven in the sense of being welcome back, I never would be. But I felt like a chapter had finally closed. I still live with Clayton. I still work part-time. But I've started volunteering at a women's shelter. I tell my story sometimes, not the softened version, but the truth. That one night of wine and anger cost me the life I thought I'd keep forever. It's been more than a decade since that night at Carol's wedding. My daughters are grown and thriving. Tony's life is full, his home alive with love and laughter. And me? I've learned to live with the fact that you can be sorry, you can change, you can even find purpose again. But you can't ever go back to the moment before you broke someone's trust. And that's the moment I'll always live with.